Hey everyone, it's Marv. I'm speaking with Kristin from Holidays After Dark, and we are going to talk about. And it doesn't matter what time of the year it is that we're talking about this subject. We're talking about a favourite show that both of us love, and that is
Deck the Hallmark.
okay. Explain to people what Deck the Hallmark is, Kristin. People have got to get in the spirit.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come and talk about, something that I'm obsessed with, and Deck the Hallmark is definitely an example of that. So basically the premise of Deck the Hallmark is it's three guys who, a couple of them were former educators. Funny enough, they decided that it would be kind of funny and entertaining to watch all the new Hallmark movies, especially the Christmas ones, and kind of talk about them, review them. And what I find the most entertaining about it is that they all three have very different viewpoints. So Dan hates them, Bran is obsessed with them, and then Brian and formerly Panda, the original third host, were kind of in the middle about them. So watching the three guys and their different perspectives, like kind of argue about them. And especially Dan really cracks me up because he calls out kind of the ridiculous aspects of the Hallmark movies and things like that. So it was the very first podcast that I got into. It's like what introduced me to podcasts.
Right.
I was at a job where I was spending a lot of time by myself and I needed some form of entertainment. And I had also started watching Hallmark movies more and more. And so I remember making a Spotify account and literally just like searching, like, is there anything that talks about Hallmark movies? Because I already watch a lot of them. And Deck the Hallmark was the first thing that came up. And this was back in 2018, the year that they actually started Deck the Hallmark.
Wow.
And I've been a diehard fan ever since. I've listened to pretty much every episode. I've seen them do a live show in Kansas City last year. I got to meet them, which was amazing. But yeah, I'm pretty much a day one fan, but it was completely by coincidence.
I'm pretty sure that I remember one or two photographs of you with them appearing on the Instagram page.
Yes, it was a fantastic day. It was funny because I'd been listening to them for 5 years at that point. And so I felt like they were friends, even though I didn't actually know them. It's not like I knew them in person or anything. But when you listen to someone literally every single day, pretty much, like I have them on when I'm getting ready for work, I'll have them on at night, like when I'm, doing my wind down process and getting ready for bed. And so it's like these people become like ingrained in your life. And so then actually getting to see them in real life and put real humans behind the voices that you're used to. It was just a super cool experience. And I thanked them for keeping me company during my solitary old job. And it was, just a great experience.
For anybody interested, because I didn't show it, I mean, no, not video, but we've already seen they've done a book as well. If you look for it, I'll Be Home for Christmas movies that they've written. And I think that gives you sort of like a little small idea, if you read a small idea of what the show is like.
Oh, yeah, it's a great book. And like you said, it's a great kind of introduction, like high level of what they do. They give great little blurbs about, I think they're direct quotes from the podcast, actually. But I think it's a good way, because I understand that not everyone is going to want to make the commitment of watching every single Hallmark movie and keeping up with the episodes that way. So to me, the book is a great option, especially for someone who doesn't want to watch all the movies, but they still just kind of want to know, what are the movies about? And generally, the premises and everything is just it's a good addition to their bread and butter, which of course is the podcast itself.
Yeah, but also at the same time, the book is it's like those books where you know, where you buy these books and you think, oh, I want to watch something or I want to listen to this. You'll find books about records or a band and catalogue or whatever, and book about films, and you'll think, oh, what's this film about? But in this case, it's sort of like that with films. But at the same time, you've got all these three different opinions as well to base your decision on at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I relate the most to Bran because I do really like the movies for the most part. I fully understand that there are some of them that are just absolutely terrible, and I'll be the first to admit that. But I generally am obsessed with Christmas, so I love his Christmas spirit, and I generally am the movies are definitely a big like comfort item for me, which I'm sure a lot of people relate to. Like I work in a fairly stressful job, and so it's nice coming home and having something that's like the complete opposite of what I deal with on a daily basis. And I go from seeing like some of the worst of humanity to like some of the most lighthearted and fun. And I wish the world was more Hallmark, like, as ridiculous as it may seem sometimes. But then yeah, you know, I used to play a lot of the episodes like out loud at work because my coworker wanted to know what it was all about, and so I would play it through our Bluetooth speakers. And so even he, who like has never watched a Hallmark movie in his life, he was laughing out loud to all the episodes of Deck the Hallmark just because their banter about it was so funny.
But also the fact that they know very well that there's almost like it's not a meme, but this thing that goes round every year at Christmas where you'll see this. It's like a guide, and it will say it's like these tropey things that happen in the films, and then it's sort of like a mix and match. So girl meets boy, they have a problem, and they go to this and this, that, and there's all these little tropes that you find in these films a lot, and they make fun of these tropes as well, especially when they're done ham-fistedly on occasion. But
yeah.
At the same time, what you were saying about, you've come away from work where it's been stressful, or you've come from this situation, and you'll come home, you'll take off the uncomfortable shoes, put on the comfortable socks, get the comfortable drink and possibly something to eat as well, snack wise, and put on this comfortable film that, you know what's going to happen in it, but that's why it's comfortable.
Exactly. Like you never have to worry, like when you're watching a Hallmark movie, like, oh, is this going to make me really depressed? Or is this going to like, have a terrible ending? It's like, even though sometimes it would be nice to change it up like a touch, it is nice that at the end of the day, like I've never come out of a Hallmark movie like feeling worse about the world than before I went into it, which is a very nice thing because so many other genres and types of movies, like you never really know what you're getting yourself into until it's too late. And then even if you don't like it, or, oh, well, I wasn't really in the mood for a depressing movie, but here we are, like it's nice to kind of know what you're signing up for.
Yeah, and you don't have to, if you're tired as well, you don't have to exercise your brain too much as well, trying to work out these things that are going on and, oh, will this lead to that and this lead to that and all these difficult
exactly
things. They're simple enough just to be able to sit down, relax, and
or even multitask. Like there have been times where I've like, worked on my own podcast stuff while watching a movie, because you can kind of, switch your attention back and forth, and that you didn't miss anything like crazy from the storyline. And like during the Christmas season, when they show the Christmas movies on Hallmark Channel, like around the clock, that's just like my go-to background channel. Like, because I'm the type that pretty much turns on my TV the second I get home, and it stays on the rest of the day, and sometimes even the rest of the night. And so it's just very nice, like background stuff to have, because every time you look up, even if you're not watching it, it's pretty, it looks like Christmas. It's a good way to catch like some of the movies that they re-show that are a little bit older. And yeah, it's definitely like a very weird transition day when they stop showing them, like after the new year. It's always kind of a sad day when I turn on the TV and it's like, oh, okay, now they're gone.
Plus, you notice that from her mid-20s onwards, that is it Lacey Chabert has not aged one bit.
Oh yeah, that's so true. I mean, I first discovered her watching the movie Mean Girls, and I swear she doesn't even look that much different than in that movie. And that was like in 2004 or something like that. So it's pretty crazy. And I'm definitely kind of glad that she's like the new queen of Hallmark, because I've always liked her movies and have the nostalgic connection from my teenage and younger years of watching Mean Girls, where she kind of got her start in the mainstream and whatever. But yeah, that's 100% true.
She was actually a child actress in an episode of Ghost Whisperer, if you're interested as well.
Okay.
My other half mentioned that, and she said, "Oh, that's Lacey Chabert," and I'm like, "Oh, it is." Yeah.
Oh, nice. I'm not sure I was aware of that.
But so, I mean, going from there, do you think, is there any way at all that Deck the Hallmark influenced the way that you do your podcast and how your podcast came about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know it definitely like inspired me to try podcasting, because I would obsessively talk about it so much at work. And actually the way that I started my podcast was because a former coworker was like, you're always talking about podcasts, you're always telling good story, like interesting stories at lunch, like things like that. Like, why don't you try having a podcast? And so even though mine is like very different format wise, because mine's like fully scripted and research based and things like that, which is obviously very different than what Deck the Hallmark does. Yeah. They definitely, because they introduced me to the podcast world in general, they definitely were like it made me feel more comfortable getting into it, because I had been listening to podcasts because of them and would hear them. Because usually at the beginning of every episode, they kind of have like a little bit of just like banter discussion time. And they'll talk about random stuff, usually like stuff that's actively going on either in their lives or with the podcast, whatever. And so I know they would mention little things here and there that kind of like taught me like, oh, okay, that's how you do that, or that's how that works and whatever. And then, yeah, they're just overall just generally provided just a lot of inspiration. And like, I mean, they're just incredible, because I mean, they very much have reached the pinnacle of podcasting in many ways, because they, were able to quit their day jobs in order to focus on it full time. And they've been on Good Morning America and the Kelly Clarkson show. And, they've written, books and all that kind of stuff. And so in many ways, it's like what we all in our dreams would aspire to be. And not that I ever expect to necessarily reach that level, but I do think it's always good to have someone who has figured it out and kind of look to what they're doing. So I would say I've absolutely gotten inspiration from them.
I'll quickly say that I found that the recent episode, I mean, this isn't going out for a while, but I found the recent episode Mother's Day fascinating, where you spoke about the dark side to mothers. Oh
yeah. Well, I work in law enforcement for a living, and I have degrees in criminal justice and whatever. And so that's honestly like the first thing that always comes to my mind, like when I think about either holidays or whatever, is like, okay, oh, that famous crime was associated with that. And I was, thinking about what should I do for Mother's Day? And because there's really not a lot of like history to it. And I've already talked about that last year. And so I was kind of like wondering if I should even do a Mother's Day episode. And then all those famous cases like occurred to me. And I was like, oh, that's a perfect idea. Dark, but that's the name of the podcast. So I went with it.
It's a bit like discussing or talking about the St. Valentine's Day massacre on St. Valentine's Day.
Exactly, which that was my first episode, I believe, ever. So Been there, done that. But to me, it's interesting. And like I said, it's literally what I do for a living. So I can talk about true crime like all day.
But another interesting thing is that that's not the only seasonal show that you listen to either, because I know that you listen to other shows as well, like I'm trying to think now, but there's a few of them that you listen to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of my other heavy hitter podcasts are Christmas Past by Brian Earl, which is another like godfather of podcasting. I feel like he's been doing it for so long and has just been crazy successful. And the most impressive thing to me about his podcast is that he basically goes radio silent for like 9 months out of the year, if not more. He'll occasionally pop back in and release a little something, but to me it's just crazy that he manages to maintain such a large listener base with just completely vanishing basically in many ways, so that he can focus on his family. And he's written a book now, and I know he does like a lot of interviews and stuff like that, but that's always great to me. And his was definitely a huge inspiration for me because of his history elements and the amount of research that he does. Trying to think, there's another one called It's Always Halloween that was also a big inspiration. It's hosted by Luce Tomlin Brenner, who actually lives like not far from where I used to live out in Los Angeles area. And so I initially, when I discovered her podcast, thought that was kind of cool because she would talk about a lot of the same like places that I used to go to, and had done a lot of the same LA like Halloween activities and stuff that I had done. But she also is great at researching, includes lots of really interesting facts about different Halloween elements that I wasn't aware of. I feel like her episodes have gotten a little bit less frequent over the past like 6 months to a year. So I'm always kind of like checking, like hoping that she, vamps it up again and kind of comes back with the frequency that she used to be at. But I mean, regardless, it's still a great podcast to listen to. And I learned so much. And I mean, Halloween is right up there with Christmas for me. So it keeps me very entertained.
Anyway, we'll let people know how they can get hold of you and find you then, Kristin.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on pretty much all the major social media platforms as Holidays After Dark on Twitter or X, whatever they call it now, and Instagram and Facebook. My email is Kristin@holidaysafterdark.com, and I'm always looking for listener suggestions on ideas for topics. And I've started doing some interviews on my show, so that's a new realm that I'm breaking into, and I'm always kind of scouting for guests and whatever. So yeah, but I'm always happy to hear from listeners. And the podcast is found on all the big platforms as well: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, all that kind of stuff. So check it out.
Thank you, Kristin. It's been too long since we last talked.
Agreed. Thank you again so much for letting me pop on the show.
Thank you. Everybody take care. Thanks for listening.